wonder how someone like me ended up in Beaufort. The truth is, I wasn't looking for Beaufort. I was looking for answers. There was a small cottage beneath the trees at Penn Center. During the Civil Rights era, Martin Luther King Jr. came here with other leaders to meet, think, and plan. It offered something rare in the segregated South: privacy, safety, a place where difficult conversations could take place beyond the glare of the outside world. In 1963, standing before the Lincoln Memorial, King looked backward. He looked back 100 years to the Emancipation Proclamation and to a promise the country had made but had not yet completely kept. Near the conclusion of his speech, he repeated a simple phrase: "Let freedom ring." Those words came from an old American song, "My country, 'tis of thee." But 100 years before King's speech, that same song had risen spontaneously from a crowd here in Beaufort County. But this is not a story about Martin Luther King Jr. It is a story about Beaufort, about beauty and contradiction, about freedom and ownership, about what remains after a social order collapses, and about a country still trying to catch up to its own words. To understand that story, we have to travel backwards. Beaufort is an easy place to admire. The waterfront, the boats moving through the harbor, the live oaks reaching across quiet streets, the historic homes standing behind brick walls and iron gates. At sunset, the town seems to soften. The water catches the last light. The old buildings begin to glow. And for a moment, Beaufort can feel almost untouched by time. Places carry it, sometimes openly, sometimes beneath the surface, and sometimes inside the stories we choose to tell about them. Beaufort has been photographed, painted, written about, and turned into a movie set. These streets and houses have helped create the image many people carry of the Lowcountry: graceful, beautiful, almost suspended in time. One of Beaufort's most recognizable houses is Tidal Home. It appeared in The Great Santini, adapted from Pat Conroy's novel. A few years later, it became the central house in The Big Chill. The films used this architecture because it already seemed to contain a story: a large southern house, a waterfront landscape, a sense of beauty mixed with memory and loss. But movie images can do what postcards do. They can frame a place so perfectly that we stop asking what lies outside the frame. Before the cameras arrived, before the novels and the movies, these neighborhoods represented something else: power, status, land, and enormous wealth. Before the Civil War, Beaufort was one of the wealthiest communities in the South. That wealth came from the surrounding sea islands, from rice, from indigo, and especially from Sea Island cotton. But the prosperity visible in Beaufort did not emerge from the soil on its own. It was created through enslaved labor. The grand homes, plantations, and family fortunes that define this region depended upon people who had no control over their work, their movement, or their own lives. The beauty survived. The system beneath it was about to collapse. I'm here on the waterfront in Beaufort, South Carolina. In 1861, Beaufort was one of the first southern cities to fall to the Union forces during the Civil War. That makes this place the first location in the South where the old rules no longer applied. And when that happens, everything that seems fixed is suddenly unstable. In November 1861, Union naval forces captured Port Royal Sound. The white plantation families fled Beaufort and the surrounding islands. At Penn Center, the exodus is remembered as the Great Skedaddle. The phrase sounds almost humorous. The event was not. Families packed what they could and escaped inland. They left houses, furniture, crops, livestock, plantations, and thousands of enslaved people. Many believed they would return when the Union forces were driven away. For most, that day never came. Family fortunes disappeared almost overnight. But there is an important distinction. The plantation owners lost property. The people they abandoned had been treated as property. They remained behind in a condition the nation had never seriously confronted. Their enslavers were gone, but slavery had not yet been abolished. They were not legally free, yet the system that had controlled their lives was no longer being enforced in the same way. Something had broken open. No one knew exactly what would follow. The federal response became known as the Port Royal Experiment. Even the word experiment reveals the uncertainty of the moment. Could formerly enslaved people work for wages? Could they receive an education? Could they manage farms? Could they own land? Could they build institutions? Could they direct their own lives? The people living here did not need to prove their humanity or their capability. The nation was the one struggling to recognize it. On Dataw Island, the physical remains of the plantation world are still visible. Tabby walls rise from the ground, made from oyster shells, lime, sand, and water. They're beautiful now, weathered, textured, almost sculptural. But ruins can soften the history they contain. They show age. They show craftsmanship. They show what survived. They do not automatically reveal the human cost. These plantations were homes for the families who controlled them. They were also places of forced labor for the people whose lives sustained them. You can change the rules on paper, but you can't change what was built here over generations. It just stays here, slowly breaking apart. That may be one of the hardest truths about emancipation. A law can change legal status. It cannot instantly dismantle everything that constructed around the old system. The habits, the economic relationships, the racial hierarchy, the ownership of land, the assumptions about whose voice mattered. Those things do not disappear when a document is signed. They survive in institutions, in wealth, in property lines, in memory, and sometimes, quite literally, in the ground. brick church has stood here for more than a century and a half, but it's never really been just a church. It was built by enslaved craftsmen, men whose names history rarely recorded, but whose hands left something behind that would outlive all of them. In November of 1862, these walls witnessed something extraordinary. A preliminary version of Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was read aloud here, months before it actually took effect. Imagine hearing those words for the very first time, not as rumor, not as hope, but as possibility. Freedom had finally been spoken. But freedom by itself wasn't enough. Because the day after freedom comes another question. Now what? The answer began right here. In 1862, what would later become the Penn Center opened its doors inside this very church as the Penn School, one of the first schools in the South created to educate formerly enslaved people. Reading, writing, citizenship. The tools to build a life that slavery had tried to deny. During my visit, one of the church elders quietly unlocked the sanctuary and welcomed me inside. Standing there with my camera, it struck me that history survives because someone chose to care for it. Generation after generation, it opens the door. These bricks have witnessed bondage, the first words of freedom, the first lesson of a new future, and today they continue to remind us that ideas don't simply change history. They have to be carried forward by someone willing to protect them. In 1862, while the Civil War was still being fought, a school was established on St. Helena Island. What became Penn School began before the Emancipation Proclamation took effect. That matters. People here were already constructing lives beyond slavery while the nation was still debating what freedom would mean. Education was not simply about learning to read and write. Literacy offered access to contracts, wages, property records, court proceedings, political participation, and the ability to recognize when someone was using the written word against you. Freedom would require more than release from bondage. It would require knowledge, structure, institutions, and community. This place doesn't really give you the moment back. It's too quiet, too broken down. But on this site, on January 1st, 1863, near this location that I'm at right now, was Camp Sexton. And thousands gathered here for the first public reading of the Emancipation Proclamation. So standing here, you have to rebuild that scene in your mind. A bright January sun filters through the live oaks. The Beaufort River glitters beyond the crowd. A cool northwest breeze carries the smell of salt marsh and wood smoke. Uniform buttons catch the light. Children shift impatiently. Somewhere, a horse stamps the ground. On January 1st, 1863, more than 5,000 people gathered near this site at Camp Sexton. Men, women, children, teachers, missionaries, Union officers, and soldiers of the 1st South Carolina Volunteers, one of the earliest black regiments in the Union Army. They came to hear the Emancipation Proclamation read aloud on the day it took effect. For the people gathered here, this was not a distant political argument. The document concerned their bodies, their families, their labor, their names, their right to belong to themselves. American flag was presented to Colonel Thomas Wentworth Higginson, commander of the 1st South Carolina Volunteers. Then something happened that had not been included in the program. A voice in the crowd began to sing, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty." Other voices joined. The song moved through the gathering. Land where my fathers died, land of the Pilgrim's pride. People who had lived under slavery were singing words written about American liberty. They were not asking permission to belong to the country. They were claiming the country's language as their own. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. What gets me is the proclamation was actually formal language, legal language, emancipation. The people here answered it with a song. And maybe that's the real story of this place. The legal language said one thing, but the human reaction said another. The plantation system left behind ruins. Penn helped build institutions. Its work began with education, but it did not stop there. Penn became a center of community life, agriculture, health, leadership, land preservation, culture, civil rights. Its history recognizes something proclamations alone could never accomplish. Freedom had to become practical. It needed schools, teachers, records, organizations, meeting places, and people willing to continue the work. This is a part of the story that people miss. Freedom wasn't just declared, it had to be built. Education, structure, and community had to be created at the same time. While touring the Penn Center, I met Carla, one of the center's docents. As she shared the remarkable story of Penn Center and its role both before and after emancipation, it became clear that this place was much more than a historic landmark. Before leaving, I asked Carla if she'd be willing to answer one simple question. What is the legacy of Penn Center?
The legacy is based on Penn School, the first school for newly freed West Africans and their descendants in the South. The significance is they were running a school during the Civil War. That's quite significant. So it was a head start in the Reconstruction promises for African Americans. And another significant point to me is that a lot of the funding was coming from abolitionists in Philadelphia, and also the leadership came from abolitionist missionary women. So 3 women who were ordinary citizens, and money that came from ordinary citizens, but they knew that to rehabilitate the country and to rehabilitate the community, the African American community, which at the time was 4.5 million, that education is the leveling force, and that was very important. And these women, they risked their well-being to be here to establish the school, and of course that educational model was copied throughout the country, and they call it the Port Royal experiment because it was a part of the Reconstruction promises, and it was unknown if people who had been in brutal chattel slavery for generations could be rehabilitated emotionally, mentally, financially, and the significance is that the experiment was successful.
Yeah. Driving through Beaufort, it's easy to understand why writers and filmmakers have been drawn here. The place appears to arrive already composed. The houses, the trees, the water, the light. Titleholm became a backdrop for the Great Santini and later the Big Chill. But for Pat Conroy, Beaufort and the Lowcountry were never merely beautiful settings. They were emotional territory. The landscape held family history. Violence, love, shame, loyalty, loss, and the complicated pull of home. Conroy did not write about a South in which beauty erased pain. He wrote about what happened when both occupied the same ground. I came here to pay my respects to Pat Conroy. He spent much of his writing life trying to understand the Lowcountry, not to solve it, not to make it innocent, but to understand why a place could hold such beauty and such pain at the same time. You know, this place doesn't produce simple stories. It produces layered ones. And writers like Pat Conroy didn't smooth out the edges. He leaned into the contradiction. Conroy opened The Prince of Tides with words that now appear on his grave. My wound is geography. It is also my anchorage, my port of call. That may be one of the most honest descriptions of this landscape, because geography here is never simply scenery. It is plantation land, abandoned land, purchased land, inherited land, contested land. It is where people were enslaved, where plantation families fled, where freedom was announced, where families attempted to build independent lives, and where their descendants continue fighting to preserve what was handed down. A place can wound because of what happened here. It can anchor because of the people, memories, and stories rooted in its soil. The wound and the anchorage can occupy the same ground. Not far from Conroy's grave stand the ruins of the Chapel of Ease. The chapel once served the plantation families who lived too far from Beaufort to attend services in town. Today the roof is gone, the congregation is gone, the plantation society it served is gone, but portions of the tabby walls remain. Places like this do not offer a neat moral. They reveal how one historical world can disappear while leaving its physical structures behind. A ruin is not simply the past. It is the past continuing to occupy space in the present. Conroy's geography is here too. The wound, the anchorage, the place that holds both. You might wonder how someone like me ended up in Beaufort. The truth is, I wasn't looking for Beaufort. I was looking for answers. And before I knew it, I wasn't chasing answers anymore. I was chasing a story. The thing about travel is sometimes we think we're choosing a destination, and then sometimes the destination chooses us. Because every place has a story. Every place has a voice that we should slow down and listen to. If this film has done anything, I hope that it hasn't just taught you something about Beaufort. I hope it made you curious enough to ask your own questions, curious enough to follow wherever those questions may lead you. Maybe they'll lead you to Beaufort. Maybe they'll lead you to Fort Frederick and Penn Center. And maybe they'll lead you to some place that I haven't discovered yet. Because sometimes the best journeys don't always begin with a destination. Sometimes the best journeys begin with a question.